Good morning, everyone. We're going to give it a minute here just as people start joining the webinar, and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your patience. For folks who are just joining us, we're just going to give it about 30 seconds yet while we're getting everybody in from the waiting room, and we'll get going here momentarily. All right, a couple minutes after the top of the hour. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar. We'll just go around and introduce ourselves for anyone who hasn't seen our smiling faces yet. I think most people probably have, but we always like to say hi. My name is Erin Larandos. I am the Digital Equity Program Manager here at the Arizona Commerce Authority, and I'm going to send it over to Crystal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Severse. I'm the Broadband Data and GIS Analyst with Arizona Commerce Authority.
Hello, everyone. I'm Perla Lopez. I'm the Broadband Program Manager with the Arizona Commerce Authority.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Candace Hamana. I'm the Tribal Liaison with the Arizona Commerce Authority.
Okay, well, I can go ahead and get started. Unfortunately, Sandeep wasn't able to, he had another obligation, so he's not able to be here and give this BEAD roundtable. So I'm going to fill in, and I think today that we're mostly going to focus on the challenge process. If you weren't able to attend the demo with AppGeo, I'm going to be going over mostly everything that they covered, and then kind of talk about a couple of other additions that we've made to the portal. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And I guess Perla and Erin, if people have questions, do they post that in the chat or do they raise their hand?
I can definitely watch the Q&A. There's a bar down in the bottom of your screen. There'll be a little box for Q&A. If you'd like to type your questions there, we do have a pretty decent sized group, so I think it'd be easier to manage that way, but we can always invite conversation later on if there's follow-up as well.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so I'm going to start by just kind of going to the Arizona Commerce's webpage. So azcommerce.org/broadband. From there, I'm going to go to BEAD and then challenge process. Here's where all of the information about the challenge process sits for Arizona. So the easiest way to access the map is to go here. But for folks that are just trying to shorthand that, it's az.broadbandnavigator.com is going to take you to our broadband map. So as soon as you go log on,
I'm sorry
to
I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't see your browser window right now.
Oh, you can't?
No, we see your desktop.
Thanks for catching that. All right, let me start over. I'm just kidding. Okay, so you go to the ACA webpage, then you'll click on the Broadband Navigator map. So it's going to take you to the Arizona Broadband Navigator. then it'll show this splash screen. So folks that aren't familiar with the challenge process, they'll start here and they'll learn what are the FCC and NTIA's definition of served, unserved, and underserved is. If you don't want to see this, again, you can click here and go to explore the map. So it takes you directly to, this map of Arizona. Its default is county data sets, and these are data donuts. So it tells you basically the status of coverage that's below 100 by 20. If you want to change that, you can just toggle these different tabs right here, and it'll show you a different data set. And notice that it also changes this information here. All right, so we can take a look at different boundaries. So the default, like I said, is county. Something that we've added are the tribal boundaries. This was very important. Let's see, if we click on Navajo Nation, we can see the status of service for the entire nation right here. That's a pretty large number of underserved households. And you can do that for any tribal boundary. So we'll just go back to counties. We're going to take a look at the funding. So here are the boundaries of some of the funding data sets that we've collected from the FCC. They're color coordinated. So we've got EACAM, REP, RDOF. If we zoom into an RDOF layer, if we zoom in, we can see the individual households. So it says that this is funded through RDOF, and it has the awardee right here. If you need more information about basically how this funding data set came to be, you can go to the help. If you find funding layer here, it'll tell you where we got these data sources. Most of these data sources came directly from NTIA, but you can go to these individual funding sources and see what kind of stipulations they have for those funding. So for example, if I go to RDOF, I'll go to FCC's RDOF page. And most of these have a link where you can download those shapefiles directly. Let's see. All right, so that's basically the rundown of the funding. Okay. So I'm going to just turn this off because it's a little bit busy on the map. See, we're going to click on a county and check out the broadband and digital equity indicators. So if we look to the left of the map, it'll show these broadband and digital equity indicators. This data was taken from the Census Bureau and the American Community Service data. So we can see coverage for the county of Coconino. We can see speeds. Subscription, this is what's taken from ACS data, income, race, and age. We can also take a look at the numeric values for these. So this is a breakdown of all those indicators. And so we can do that for any boundary. Okay, so if we want to look at the individual households or BSLs, we can either zoom into the map and see at this scale, we can see the household level information, or you can search for an address. Let's see, I'm going to search for the Arizona Commerce's address. So once we search for that address, we can see the availability data right here. This is taken directly from the FCC's most recent EDC data. So I believe that was March 5th was the last pool. So we can see every provider that serves this location. And we can see if there's any broadband funding available there. Notice this is kind of blank right now. our office has found a lot of discrepancies with the TBCP data that we're currently getting fixed with NTIA. But if you want to know the direct status of the TBCP data, like I said earlier, you can go to those funding layer sources and go to the TBCP link here, which isn't here. So we'll get that added. But there's a map that they have that has where those locations are. We can also kind of use this to see generally where those areas are being funded. Let's see, I see some RDOF areas right here, so we'll just take a look at those. Normally it'll have who the funding source is, so RDOF, and then who the awardee is. So for this one, it's GLinks. Okay, kind of run through the funding pretty quickly. So now that we've got this BSL selected, I'm going to show you how you can submit a speed test or report a service issue. So once you've selected an address, you can click take a speed test. Now, if any of these apply, you can check them. If they don't apply, don't worry about it. So I'm connected directly through an Ethernet cord, so none of these will apply. And I'll select go. Then it's going to run a speed test. Notice there's a lot of data here. This is pretty much necessary for a speed test. We have to have your IP address to make sure it's a valid speed test. So all those results are basically coming together. Right now, I have over 100 by 20, which means it's not going to ask me for my information. If I was at a location, for example, that was not getting 100 by 20 service, and I took that speed test, it would ask you for your email so that it could then email you to take consecutive speed tests. It's really important that people take 3 speed tests on different days in order to have evidence to support your challenge. So if I have another type of service issue going on, for example, say there's a data cap at the address that the provider has, I can report a service issue. I'll fill in all of my information here. You have to fill out all of the information in order to submit a service issue. Then you're going to want to read this here and certify that it's all correct. Then you'll click next, and then you'll be given an opportunity to upload evidence. So if I'm reporting a service issue and that there's a data cap here, I'm going to want to include some evidence that that's the case. So that can be a screenshot from the provider's webpage, or something along those lines. Originally, we only allowed PDF file types, but we've expanded that to include JPEG and PNGs. We've also included CSV or Word documents. These are mostly applicable for issues with our enforceable commitments. So we would really ask you to upload a PDF or JPEG or PNG if you're going to report a service issue. All right. So
Crystal, we have a question about speed tests. I didn't want to interrupt, but it seems like a relevant question right now. So Shay asks, how does the speed test work? Does it leverage something from the service location selected on the map, or is it a local speed test for whoever clicks the button?
Okay, so great question. So when you take a speed test, you want to make sure that your address is correct, so that you go into the address that you're currently at. Right now, I'm at the Arizona Commerce Authority, and we're getting pretty good speed, so it's a little bit hard to show you how it would actually function. But once you go into your address, you click your point on the map you'll select to take a speed test. Let's see, am I understanding that question correctly, that you would want to click your address first before you submit it, or
I think the question is, if I can say it a different way, and Shay, tell me if I'm translating correctly here. You're taking the speed test for the place where you physically are. So, for example, if you went to an under or unserved location on the map, you'd have to physically be at that location for it to be an accurate speed test. We can't run a speed test for a separate location. And Shay just added here, yes, so counties and cities would need to find addresses and then connect to the resident to take the speed test. So for example, you'd have to reach out to a potential location and have them run the speed test there.
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm not able to, I'm not actually able to click on this map somewhere that I'm not physically at and take a speed test for them. They would have to take a speed test. And I was actually going to talk about the challenge, how to submit a challenge, but this is a good segue. So my advice to everyone is that you go to the Arizona Commerce's webpage, you go to BEAD and the challenge process, and you have volume 1 handy when you're doing this. So when I go to volume 1, and this is critical because it'll tell you specific examples of evidence that you would want to have. But for this, I'm going to scroll to the speed test. Sorry if I'm giving everybody motion sickness. So these are the types of challenges, but this is really what's crucial here. These are the permissible forms of a speed test. So you either have to be, physically connected to your modem. So that means an Ethernet cord to your modem. You can have a speed test from the residential gateway web interface or from the service provider's webpage. So like if you have a resident in your county that has their service provider is Cox, you can use Cox's webpage to take a speed test. It has to be from a laptop or desktop, and it can be within the close proximity to the router, but really we want to make sure that it's the best speed test is going to be taken with an Ethernet cord and directly connected to your modem. So these are the 4 ways that you can take a speed test, or the only ones that are permissible. You can't take a speed test from your mobile device. Our portal won't allow you to do that. In theory, you could take a speed test from your mobile device, like from Cox's webpage. So I'm not sure if that's a permissible challenge. That's something that you would have to email our office, and I can get clarification on Sandeep from that. But that would not. Normally, these are the only 4 permissible ways that you can take a speed test. So if you're trying to get your residents in your county to take a speed test, I just would recommend doing a sort of campaign, getting them to go to the portal. That's the easiest way to do that because we can directly get that speed test data and have them go to their address, take a speed test. And if it's below 100 by 20 speeds, it's going to ask them for their email, and then it's going to remind them to take consecutive speed tests because they need a total of 3.
Crystal, I have one more question for you here from PJ. He asks, who is performing the speed test, the consumer or are counties expected to speed test non-RDOF locations that show served and we desire to challenge? If consumer, the ACA is not communicating statewide to the citizens, so counties have an unfunded requirement to communicate with citizens somehow. If we get 3% response, I would expect that to be on the high side of engagement.
Okay, well, that's a great question. And that is the gist of it. So I'm not sure that other states performed countywide or statewide speed test campaigns. Other states did not have a problem with getting folks to participate in the speed test challenge. There are states like, I believe it was Rhode Island or maybe Illinois that had hundreds of thousands of speed tests. The issue with that was that they weren't consecutive. So I guess our office didn't predict that there would be a problem with people participating in taking a speed test, because I take speed tests all the time if there's an issue with my service, just to know, okay, maybe the upload isn't performing as I'd like, and that's why it's hard to get my maps to update or something like that. But generally, people don't have an issue with taking the speed test. It's the consecutive part that gets people. So that's why AppGeo has created this module that, we don't have to directly reach out to these folks to get them to take a consecutive speed test. That's done in the back end. The portal sends an automatic email to them and reminds them to take consecutive speed tests. But generally, yes, if say you're wanting to submit a challenge in a non-RDOF area, well, these are pretty much already BEAD funded. So you're going to want it to go to a place that has, you see a lot of green. But really, it's if there's a known issue in your county. So for example, let's say that we know that generally this place gets pretty bad service, even though the service providers are reporting over 100 by 20 service. If there's a known issue, then I would want this community to take a speed test, and I would probably target them and let them know that there is BEAD funding available if we find out what the issue is here, and that these are actually not served, like a provider is reporting. Let's see, taking a look at this community right here, I'm going to go ahead and just take a look at the census blocks. So in volume 1, we also have this bit of information here. It talks about NDU challenges and area challenges. So an area challenge is triggered if 6 or more BSLs, broadband service locations, in which are using a particular technology and have the same provider, are within a census block group or challenged. So that means, sorry, let me change this to census block group. So this is a pretty large area. So if 6 of these BSLs, let's say they all have the same provider. So we're going to pick on Charter Communications. So these all have the same provider that are offering the same speeds, and say that we know based on the community, like their feedback, that this is not correct, that Charter is not actually providing these services. Then I would have 6 or more of these homes submit speed tests. If 6 or more submit valid speed tests that are below 100 by 20, it triggers an area challenge for this entire census block group, meaning everybody that has that same provider, it automatically triggers a challenge for everybody. So following up on that, for service provider to rebuttal that information is here too. So they would basically have to take a random sample of that census block group and prove that that's not the case. I hope that answers your question, PJ.
I haven't seen any follow-ups from PJ, but I do have a couple more that seem like they fit in right here.
Okay.
So Brittany asks, to clarify, areas that are yellow and or red are automatically BEAD funded and do not require extra steps?
Yes, these areas that are unserved or underserved, so yellow is going to be underserved, that aren't already funded are BEAD eligible.
Okay.
Yes, and as far as I know, I mean, sorry, that's not true. These are BEAD eligible. There's going to be a couple of, let's say a provider has service here, but it hasn't been reported to the FCC. It doesn't matter. It's BEAD eligible. Unless that provider challenges and says, like, we provide service here, we're going to give you evidence that we've submitted to the FCC, and that the newest version of the BDC data that comes out in May is going to have these updated. Then we would accept that challenge and then flip that to non-BEAD eligible. But as it stands, if it's not challenged, if there's no funding type here, these are BEAD eligible.
Okay. So it sounds like PJ would actually like to follow up on his question. Is it okay if I bring him up to the stage right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. PJ, I'm going to click allow to talk for you, and you should get a pop-up.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, a couple things around the BEAD funding. So, yeah, I appreciate what you've covered. Thank you so much. The challenge has become that some of these census block data areas have less than 10 people. And I know at one point that I'd asked that question at some point during this entire process about how many people, and this was asked of Nicole at the NTIA, how many people are required to actually report in any census block in order for it to be a considered challenge for the block? And she said one, that at that time it was as minimal as one, because in some of those blocks, there may not be more than a handful of people. And so any minimum requirement would be a challenge. And then on top of it, we have areas which, because of things like RDOF puts out a blanket of census blocks saying they will be there. They are not currently there. So they immediately get eliminated for BEAD funding, unfortunately. I'm hoping that will change and we can look at RDOF as not being considered a federally funded program that would conflict with BEAD, because there's no guarantee that RDOF is expected to execute. We've already seen the record numbers of givebacks of those that failed to complete their tasks. So in order to successfully be eligible for BEAD, we not only have to identify what areas are covered by RDOF, eliminate that from the map, and then look at what areas are considered served and review just those specific areas. And then we have an unfunded mandate to which the counties have to go and knock on doors to get 6 people within a specific region to be willing to take 3 speed tests on 3 different days, to which they may not have those services because they're reported as sufficient, but they may not actually have them. So how would we overcome those challenges if the reporting structure is such that knocking on doors, one, would be very difficult, particularly in a very diverse community where you may be talking secondary languages, maybe disabled people, elderly people, people that are unable to advocate for themselves in that capacity. And often many of the counties, including this one, don't have a staff that would be able to do that. So we don't have a marketing campaign. There's no marketing support from the ACA. There's no marketing support from NTIA for us to build this communication channel and get people ramped up to build a challenge. So I appreciate the time and effort and resources that have been put into this. However, I think there are still a number of things that are going to become significant obstacles for any county to try and overcome in successfully challenging these areas. So I guess my question was, what's the best method? Can we get an eligible location map rather than having to decipher what areas in our own counties will be considered eligible for challenge? Because again, things like RDOF they're maybe no service, but our offices are going to, so we can't even begin to apply for that. And again, counties don't benefit directly from the funding, right? I mean, in transparency, the counties don't benefit from any BEAD funding. What the counties do benefit from is being able to engage with the ISPs that we're trying to attract to our regions and service the underserved or non-served communities. And that's why we're here advocating. And so how do we, I guess I'm just kind of throwing it out there for dialoguing question and conversation, as well as questioning, what are the best methods? What's the practice that all 15 counties in the state should start taking to effectively communicate in a uniformed manner that this is what we need our citizens to do. This is why it's important. And this is why the citizens need to be aware of how it works, because the counties don't always have those resources.
Yeah, that's a fabulous point, DJ. So, and there's a lot to kind of touch on. I can't talk about, I'm not sure that I'm equipped to talk about the shortage of funding for this sort of support. But if you want to follow up, I can set something up with Sandeep and we can kind of work through that. I know that that's something that we've not particularly a shortage of funding support, but basically I know that there's some folks from local and county government that have asked for sort of like a, what would you call it? Kind of like a kit to start this kind of campaign for their community. So basically how, and I'm not sure how to provide a kit. I know that what we've already done for some communities is kind of give them a breakdown of how many unserved and underserved they have in their county and the types of the current providers that are bringing 100 by 20 service and the number of folks that they're providing service to. We could do something like that for you, PJ, but I think that really first you want to consult this map. This is the authoritative data set. This is basically, as far as we know, this is the most correct data for Arizona. And so this is where I would always start. But if you want that breakdown, we can definitely provide that to you. And if other people on this call feel the same way, we can definitely do something like that. And I know a lot of people here kind of have voiced that they're not GIS experts, so it doesn't help that we have, it's for some it's helpful that we have the data here, but not for everybody because they might not be able to ingest all of it. But as a reminder, we have the list of unserved and underserved location IDs available here. You do need a CostQuest license to basically map it. And if you want to know how to get a CostQuest license, there's information on our website here. We also have all the funding information here. So if you do have GIS support, this would be a way to map it. If you don't, then I would start with this map because this is updated when the FCC updates their BDC data. When we get updated information about funding from NTIA, we update this map. As far as a narrative for counties and local government, it's got to be tailored. I don't know how to get that message across for your county because I'm not there and I don't know that community and I don't know if this census block group actually struggles with the service that this provider has said that they provided, because we don't know the community like you do. So we're hoping that counties and local government are better equipped to get that message out, that it's important for you to participate if what this map is showing is not true, because you could be BEAD eligible.
Well, thank you, Crystal. I really appreciate the time and attention to answer that question. I do appreciate you. And I do think it's important also to note that this past week I spent time speaking also with the states of Kansas, Nebraska, and New Mexico, and this is not an isolated issue, right? I mean, this is a national issue from that perspective. So we shouldn't feel alone in the struggle and the challenge here. And that's where, if nothing else, I appreciate being able to have the dialogue with the ACA and help identify for our state what we need to do to push back on NTIA or federal agencies which are overlooking how this works. Because as you point out, Crystal, the difference is we know how our counties work and we know how our people are. We know what services are available. And people at the higher levels often do not. So they're painting with a very broad brush, and it often overlooks what needs to be done properly. So I do appreciate you, and I appreciate the effort of everybody that's working towards this task. Thank you.
Philip, you're 100% correct. And but just send us an email, and we're happy to get some further dialogue on this. I know that there's already some work happening. There's been a lot of basically disgruntled feelings about RDOF and how we don't know if they're actually going to fund these areas. The way NTIA has asked us, or basically told us to respond, is not respond to an email or anything like that. But basically, the way that we move forward is if a place is receiving RDOF funding, they're not BEAD eligible if they're meeting that 100 by 20 threshold and if they haven't already defaulted. We don't really like that either. If there's somebody on this call that wants to drop some information about how they're handling that, you're more than welcome to. I don't have any information specifically about how to deal with that enforceable commitment right now. I just know that, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's lots of other places in the Midwest that are very unhappy about the situation. So if you want to form a coalition, you should, by all means.
I see a bunch of questions in our Q&A right now. Crystal, I want to check in with you to see if there are other things that you want to show, or would you like to do some additional questions? Some of them are related to what PJ brought up and some of them are separate. So I just want to give space for everybody.
Okay, real quickly, I'm just going to show folks how to register if you haven't already done that. So to register, let me try this again. You're going to go to sign in and then request a new account. You'll enter your name, email address, phone number, then the type of permissible challenger you belong to. So unit of local or tribal government. You can choose from this drop down. And if you don't see your organization here, you can go to other and then type your organization here. And then you'll provide your webpage link. When you're signing up, we ask that you use your email address with the organization you're affiliated with. This helps us basically validate your request quicker. And then you'll send the request. So that's how you become basically a registered user for the challenge process. Once you become a registered user, you can make challenges. So let me go ahead and sign in. So once I've signed in and I click on these BSLs or whoever I want to challenge, it now gives me the option to submit a challenge. So these are the types of challenges. Like I said before, I would just kind of have volume 1 handy to reference on what's an allowable challenge, what types of evidence you might want to include. This is all outlined in volume 1. Say I want to submit an availability challenge. I'm going to want to provide which provider I subscribe to, why I want to submit the availability challenge. So those reasons are listed here. And the type of property that I'm at, so residential. Then I want to read this and acknowledge all of this is true. And you'll go to next, and then you can choose the evidence. So like I was saying before, we've expanded the file types beyond PDF. You can now submit JPEGs and PNGs for basically enforceable commitments where we kind of want more information about that individual household. You can submit a CSV to us. To file or to submit a bulk challenge, you'll click on this little icon here, and it's going to allow you to make the polygon. Then I'll go to submit challenge. What type of challenge that I'm making. Then you'll fill out all of this information. And then you'll upload the evidence. So once I submit that challenge and everything goes through, you'll get basically a little message here. It'll be green. It'll tell you challenge, basically challenge submitted. I can't do this on this website since it's live, but that's how that's going to work, and that's how you'll know that your challenge went through. You can also go to the challenge dashboard. I'm going to avoid this because I don't want you to see the status of challenges in Arizona, but as a permissible challenger, you can go to the challenge dashboard, and if you have multiple people in your organization, everybody will be able to see the same dashboard. So if you are with a county and you're not, maybe actively submitting challenges, but you want to know the status of the challenges in your county, if you belong to that organization, you can look at the challenge dashboard here. So that's pretty much everything I was going to cover today. And so we have plenty of time for questions.
Okay, I'm just going to go back up to the top and start shooting them your way.
Okay.
So the first one we got that we haven't answered yet is from Isaac, and it says, how should failing latency less than 100 ms be reported if the speed passes the 100 by 20?
If the speed passes 100 by 20, but there's a latency flag, it's gonna trigger a challenge. So the latency also gets captured with the speed test.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Michelle. How often will we receive the information regarding constituent speed tests from ACA?
Good question. I'm not sure if it sends, and I'll follow up with everyone on this call. So as far as I know, I'm not sure how all of the challengers receive the speed test information. I just know that it's available to all challengers as evidence. So the way that AppGeo designed this portal is that we have basically one pass-through entity that collects all of the speed test challenge and submits it to our office. And that's just because we want to maintain in every part of the state that all speed test challenges are submitted to our office. So you as a challenger, you don't have to have all the speed test data to submit a challenge. It automatically triggers a challenge on that person's behalf. And say if there's 6 places here that submit a challenge, it's going to trigger an area challenge that gets pushed up to our pass-through. And they just kind of just click submit, and it submits it to our office as a challenge. There's no additional evidence that needs to be rolled up in that because it already has the evidence that it needs, which is that the speeds aren't, the speeds that the provider has said they serve.
Makes sense. Okay, Corey asks, what is considered a census block?
Okay, great question. If you're curious, so a census block, there's census block and there's a census block group. According to our volume 1, we've said that there is that an area challenge is triggered for a census block group. So I'm in the map and I'm curious, where is the census block group? I can go to the census block group boundary and it'll show me what that boundary looks like. So this is an entire census block group right here. Let's see where it's highlighted yellow right here. And so just so everyone's aware, our census block groups come directly from the Census Bureau's Tigerline shapefiles. We use the newest decennial data set. So that's going to be 2020 and later. So if you have a GIS consultant and for whatever reason they're using really, 2019 data and earlier, they're not going to have the same census block group GeoID or shapes that we use. And that's important because some people have been comparing old census block group data with, maybe some really old RDOF data. And so it's not going to compare the same. So you probably don't need to know all of that. Just know that there's the outline, the boundaries here. And if for whatever reason you have a person doing GIS for you, you can just let them know we use the latest census data.
Great. I don't want to get away from the questions too much. I just wanted to acknowledge to this group that we had a new team member join the panel. So you'll see Kelly's face up on top here. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself really quick just to this group, and then we'll get back to the questions?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Crucy. I am on day 2 here at the Commerce Authority. Very excited to be here. I recognize some names in the list of attendees. Prior to here, I was at the Arizona Department of Education, working in the Office of Digital Teaching and Learning, working with schools on their technology and trying to understand what was happening. So there's some overlap in the work, and I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for allowing me to introduce myself.
Thank you, Kelly. And Kelly's title is our Community Engagement Manager. So you'll be seeing and hearing a lot from her as we move into the engagement portion of our process here as well. All right, back to our list of questions and answers. Another one from Michelle. Nationwide RDOF funding projects are being challenged because the ISP will not do the work, and this information remains on the books at FCC. How is ACA handling this type of issue in the state? I know we can challenge, and this goes back to PJ's point, capacity issues are prevalent throughout our municipalities. So this goes back to our previous conversation, if you have anything else to add to that. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and you and PJ are completely right. It's a known issue, and it's something that we're going back and forth with NTIA. If I knew the answer, I would have already solved it for everybody, but I don't know the answer. And basically, right now, we're just kind of scheduling one-on-one time and hearing everybody out. If there's a certain RDOF provider and you happen to know and submit information that they are going to default, I think that would count as evidence for your challenge. But other than that, you can schedule some one-on-one time, office hours. That's completely acceptable form, and you can kind of let us know what's going on. Really, that's all we can do is just have these conversations and kind of bring it to NTIA.
Mm-hmm. Relatedly, we have a question from Ken. They say, I thought that RDOF had a time frame to fulfill its commitment, and if they didn't have a plan to complete that within the time frame, then the ACA will reach out and question that group. Do you want to speak to that timeline?
That's a great question. So I know, as far as I know, RDOF, they have basically 6 years to complete their build. That's a good question.
The RDOF timeline spans further into the future than BEAD, though, correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's why, these two timelines aren't, they're not in sync. So we don't know that someone won't default after BEAD has already rolled out. And that's the issue that everybody has. Mm-hmm. And it's a relevant issue. Mm-hmm. It's something that we're currently working on too. So I guess what I'm hearing is, if you say there's a provider here that's promising to build out RDOF and, their timeline elapses in, let's say, 6 years, but they haven't even done any sort of engineering study or anything that says they have, their timeline, they will meet that requirement, that RDOF requirement in 6 years. If you're saying that you have evidence to prove that that's not the case, I would go ahead and submit it. I don't know off the top of my head if that's a permissible challenge. That's not something that I've been asked or that I know the answer to, but you can also follow up with us, schedule some office hours, and we'll make sure that Sandeep's there and that we can talk through that also.
Thank you. We have a question from Tom. Any chance ACA has a one-page PDF for the broadband navigator that we can distribute to constituents?
Yes, great question. So our PDFs aren't for the entire navigator, but we do have one-pagers is what we're calling them, on how community members can conduct a speed test or report a service issue. So if I go to the web page and I click on that, how to conduct a speed test, you can download this and distribute them to your community. So it's step-by-step instructions on what will happen, how you submit a speed test, and basically why it's important. And if they're interested in finding out more information, it'll tell them where they can visit our website. Yes, these are available for you and your community members to basically download, print, and distribute.
Perfect,
Or,
thank you.
Email.
Sorry. Or email, yes. All right, next question comes from Karen. How do you challenge a location currently not subscribing to service, but that shows it's covered by a wireless provider's propagation model that may show unrealistic coverage areas?
Okay, great question. So let's see. Let's pretend we're looking at this area, and let's see. This is really bad coverage. So let's take a look at this served areas. These are cable, but let's pretend that it's fixed wireless and that their propagation model says that they serve this, but they can't serve this. So let's see. If this household inaccurately shows that they get 100 by 20 speeds of licensed fixed wireless service, but they actually don't, the evidence that will support it, and if this person, let's say you're campaigning to this community and you're asking them to submit a speed test and they say, well, I can't because this provider doesn't actually provide service to me, they can submit a broadband service issue. So if I sign out, oops, well, I lost that area, but we can just zoom into a different one. Actually, let's make sure it's a residential address. So if I report a service issue and say that, the provider is listed there, but I don't actually get that service, you'll fill out all of this information. And what you'll do is you'll go to the provider's webpage. And when you try to sign up for service, it should tell you that they're not able to service that area, or that when you sign up for the service, they basically charge you a weird installation fee. Submit that evidence, because that furthers your claim that they are saying that they provide service here, but that's not the case. And if you are, let's say I take a speed test here and say the provider says that they serve here, but that, it won't show up that on the speed test that I'm connected to that service provider. But really, the forms of evidence we've already outlined in volume 1. So here are all the types of ways that you can gather that evidence, basically, for a situation like that.
Okay. All right, so I see Isaac has his hand raised. There's also the next 2 questions in the chat queue were from him. So why don't we just let him ask those live and go from there? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Isaac, you should have a little pop-up now where you can unmute yourself.
And hopefully you can hear me as well.
We can now, yes, perfect.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Crystal, I'd like to delve into the latency question because, again, when you take a look at the map, even with what you have up there right now, it doesn't show any latency. So you show the reported speeds from the provider, but doesn't show anything for the latency. And also relative to the map, the tabs above the map will give you, the different speeds, but if you're trying to also make sure latency is in line, let alone I think you already addressed the data cap, data limit. I'm just trying to make sure how can we ensure, because you may have cases where the provider does meet the 100 by 20, but fails on the latency side.
Okay. Since this is the second question that we've gotten regarding latency, as far as I know, when you take the speed test, it also captures the latency with the metadata.
It's not being shown. It's not being shown on the website.
Right. So I'm gonna follow, if that's okay with everybody on this call. I'm just gonna follow up with our consultant and make sure, just have them give me a verbal verification that that's also being captured. If that's not the case, I'll make sure to email everyone here and let them know that we've just discovered an issue and we're gonna amend it. But the way that, as far as our office knows, and the way that we agreed when we signed our contract with AppGeo, is that it would capture the latency with the speed test.
Yeah, it's just the same way where you have the tabs there where it says service coverage 25 by 3 and 100 by 20. It would be also good to have a layer, for the latency issue, especially when you're dealing with some of the fixed wireless or point-to-point microwave providers.
Yes. Okay. So that's a good point. So yes, it's not here. These are mostly dealing with speed. But so what I see in the back end with the data is that when NTIA pulls this list of unserved and underserved locations, they not only have to meet the speed requirements, but they have to meet the latency requirements. So if say a provider says that they meet that latency requirement and the speed requirement, then they become served. Let's say a provider, for whatever reason divulges that they meet the speed requirements but not the latency requirements, that will still show up as unserved or underserved. So let's say this household, T-Mobile says that they meet the speed requirements and the latency requirements, and you happen to know that the latency requirements are not being met, then we would ask that you take a speed test so that we can capture the latency issue.
But it's okay. So again, I just think on the left frame, it should have the latency information so you can validate saying, yes, it meets speed and latency. Right now, it's an unknown, putting the burden upon the person to try to, maybe it's there, maybe it's not there. I'm just saying it's an opportunity for improvement. My second question, since we're short on time, is I noticed off the Arkansas site that they provide a quick and easy way for their residents to submit that they're unserved. Because again, it gets into a chicken and egg. How do I use the tool if I can't get service? And they had a quick and easy way where you could just go ahead, submit your address, say it's unserved. It would check against their database to confirm the status and register the appropriate challenge, or not, or maybe it's not a challenge.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, that sounds like I'm gonna look into the Arkansas basically capability and see if that's something we can integrate as well.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate all the great job you all are doing too.
Okay.
Thank you. So there are just 2 quick questions left. I know we're almost at the top of the hour, so we appreciate everybody sticking around for these last 2. They're both from Shay. So if we need follow-up, we can always promote you to be able to speak as well. But the question is, what is the purpose of registration if we, county or city personnel, cannot do challenges against a location? And then I'm not sure what this is in relation to, but the second point that Shay posted was, so I see someone associated with an entity, but it is not a speed test approach. I think that might have been to the location that we were talking about before.
Okay, yeah. So I kind of understand your issue, and I think it's, what's the point of becoming a registered user if you can't gather the speed test evidence and submit it yourself? So the purpose of that is just basically, it's to save you time and to make sure that we don't, miss anybody nobody falls through the cracks. So if somebody, say this resident, you don't have to directly interface with them. I mean, we would want you to. If there's a known service issue here, we want you to be the face and the voice for this community, and to be able to communicate that with us. But say this person right here, gets a hold of your flyer and says, I'm going to submit a speed test and I'm going to submit 3 of them. And they do all of that. We figure out that their speeds are actually below 100 by 20. That basically just triggers an automatic challenge for our office. We do have a pass-through. That's, it's just to make sure that no data is basically left behind and that data gets to us, but it just triggers an automatic speed or latency challenge for us. You, as the permissible challenger for like your local government, you don't have to just submit speed challenges or anything like that. There's different types of challenges that are probably, pertain to you. So that's going to be, a data cap. If and this isn't usually onesie twosies, it's usually a provider that in your community that has a data cap. So we would ask you to submit that type of evidence. If you know that a technology, there's a fixed wireless provider in your community, but that there's no technology in your community for that to even be true, we would ask you to submit that type of evidence. Also, there's an issue with the FCC's data, and I'm going to show you really quickly. This is probably going to open another can of worms, but we know that there's a huge issue in the Navajo Nation data. So, for example, all of these, most of the addresses on Navajo Nation are basically, the FCC has said that these are all residential. We know that's not true. So you can submit inaccuracies with the data. So let's pretend like this is actually a business or a CAI. We could submit that type of challenge here, that the business this is actually a business, or maybe they only provide, let's say, Cox is here and this is a residential address, but for whatever reason, Cox only charges you the business rate. You can submit that challenge. If you know what types of enforceable commitments are in your community or not, you can submit those. If you know that there's a provider that will be providing service here, you can send us those. Although it's not required, we'll have one other go at deduplication after the challenge process where we get more accurate data from NTIA. And that's really to clean up the TVCP data that they've given us. So those are all the types of challenges that you can submit. We're also accepting, let's say we know that our CAI data is not 100% accurate. I mean, no data set really is. If there's an issue with the CAI data, you can submit that as a challenge, or you can email our office and say, this location says that it's a residential. Well, if it says that it's a residential address and you know that it's for certain a CAI, that could be a challenge. Let's say there's a CAI on here. Normally, if it shows green, that means it's served, but for a fact it's not served, you can email our office. So those are the other types of challenges that are very legitimate challenges that you could basically investigate and submit those challenges for.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Those are all the questions that have been put into the Q&A at this time. I know Perla just shared the office hours link, but I just wanted to drop that one more time in case you do have additional questions. We do encourage you to sign up for an office hour slot. That's a 30-minute one-on-one conversation with the office to get additional questions answered. Thank you everyone so much for your time today, and we appreciate you sticking with us a few minutes after the top of the hour. As another reminder, all of the webinars and all of the other trainings that have been provided in the last couple of weeks regarding the challenge process are all recorded and will be available on our website if you need a refresher. And of course, please do reach out to us directly with any questions that you may have. We are happy to help. And, I wouldn't be a good librarian if I didn't say, if we don't know the answer, we can get you to the people who do. So we'll make sure to get everything answered for you. So thanks everyone again so much. We appreciate your time, and have a great rest of your day.